broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of Gun Guy Radio is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to episode 192 of Gun Guy Radio. This is a podcast that shines a positive light on the firearms lifestyle. I'm your host, Jake Challand, and this is your weekly dose of positive firearms talk without the politics. Well, welcome back. I'm back here for a few episodes off and on again. A few announcements here. Ryan will be back next week. But the week after that, for episode 194, we are recording a few Gun Guy Radio throwback episodes, which means that my original co-host, Zach Carlson of Lone Wolf Distributors, will be returning for a few episodes. And this very next episode, 194, we'll be featuring also Greg Bakken of Tactical Paradise. So we will be returning to the older format, and this also means we will be firing back up the listener Q&A segment. That's right, listener questions are accepted once again. So please send your questions and comments to Jake at firearmsradio.tv, Jake at firearmsradio.tv, and please note that this is feedback for Gun Guy Radio. So yeah, look forward to answering your questions, or at least trying to, and hope to see you at episode 194. And I believe we will also be doing a Google Live Hangout for that episode, so you can catch it on the YouTubes over there and in real time. This episode, we talked to Greg from Index Point Holsters, and we talked a little bit about Illinois and concealed carry and all the fun concealed carry obstacles that there are in Illinois. And more importantly, we talk about some of our experiences. And first of all, make sure you check out Patriot Patch Company. They sponsor this episode of Gun Guy Radio. Check out the Patriotic 4-pack of patches over there, and also some of the new pre-orders. There's a Zelda-themed pre-order. If you're an old Nintendo nerd, you might dig that one. It's got a little bit of an AK twist to it, and a lot of other cool patches coming out. So check that out, patriotpatch.co. We are to the main topic, concealed carry in Illinois. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Oh, just fine, Jake. Glad to be here.
Greg, I have become acquainted over the last few months. You've been messing around with your some of your holsters here. You sent me a holster for my Springfield XDS. I've been wearing it for months now, and I really dig it. And we'll talk a little bit about your holster company here at the end of the main topic. But you and I got discussing, since we both live in Illinois, the great state, land of Lincoln.
Oh yes.
And got to talking about our concealed carry class experience, and just kind of maybe some of the perceptions that our family and neighbors might have of concealed carry, and so thought it would make a good episode. And I don't know, Greg, you had mentioned that you felt like there's kind of a hole out there in podcasting land where no one's really talked too much about concealed carrying in Illinois.
Yes, I would agree. Illinois being one of the last states to, well, actually the last state to enact concealed carry. It's so new to so many in this region, until any kind of conversation about the process, how best to sort of, get used to carrying, where you can carry, how family and friends address the topic is just something that seems like a topic whose time has come.
Absolutely. So, Greg, why don't you tell listeners real quick, how you got into guns, did you get into it growing up, or were you a firearms enthusiast from the start, or was it later in life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm from Wisconsin originally, so the gun laws in Wisconsin have always been a little looser than they are here in Illinois. So growing up in Wisconsin, always had guns around. My dad was a hunter. When I got married, my father-in-law was a huge hunter and fisherman, so I used to go hunting with them. They didn't do a lot of target practice, but I sort of got into that as a result of my hunting experience with my in-laws. So once I moved here to Chicago, to Illinois rather, I realized that I just didn't run into a lot of hunters. So the whole conversation about hunting and firearms is kind of lax, at least in the crowd that I was hanging out with at that point in time in my working life. That was many years ago. So my entry into hunting and firearms was based on my growing up experience in Wisconsin. So once I moved here to Illinois, I sort of rekindled my interests and sort of picked up a couple of handguns and really got into hunting, not hunting, but target shooting, and that led to reloading, and which led to listening to some of the podcasts around ARs. I ended up building an AR-15 a couple of years ago.
Cool.
And that turned out really, really well. And one thing led to another, and my enthusiasm and just interest in firearms just kind of continued.
Very cool. So, do we want to first dive into concealed carry and like so it's been what, 2 years now that's been available to apply for concealed.
I think it has been. This is going on the second year.
Were you like, man, been waiting for this for a long time. I'm going to be first in line to get this. Were you one of those guys?
Yes, absolutely. I was. Yes, as soon as it became available, I ran out and got my training in anticipation to getting my application in. Already having had an FOID card for since the first week that I moved to Illinois from Wisconsin, I was ready for that. I had already had a Utah concealed carry permit.
Oh, really?
Yes. And the reason why I did that is because I live very, very close to the Indiana border, and I'm in Indiana as much as I am in Illinois. So that sort of gave me an opportunity to at least carry while I was in Indiana. And so there was some practice, associated with that, and that whole comfort level and getting used to carrying. And that's something we can talk about later. That was a process in and of itself. But yes, as soon as the gate opened, I was there, ready to get my permit in before the politicians changed their mind.
Right. Which they do often in Illinois.
Yes.
But we won't get into the politics on this program.
I forgot. Yeah. Almost forgot about that. Okay.
So you signed up for your CCW class, and why don't you tell me a little bit about that whole experience from the class, the finding it, and then actually taking the class? Sure.
There's a gun shop a range that I frequent here in Illinois, and I sort of got to know the owners and the operators of the range. And as soon as we started getting close to the enactment of the law, I started asking around as to where I might, take some reliable training. So they provided a couple of options for me. So I gave both companies a call and ended up signing up with one of them, and went there to take my class. It was at one of the American Legion lodges. Walking in, I had a lot of great expectations, and I want not to say that my expectations weren't met, but I was really, really surprised at the number of people in the class. I think they had a capacity for 100, and they had probably 150 people show up. It was unbelievable. I mean, every seat in the place was taken. That I wasn't so happy about. I thought that many people, it gets a little difficult to sort of keep that many people in check. And there were some just crazy, outlandish questions being, thrown at the instructor. And he did his best to sort of keep things in check. But, as always, you get that guy, right?
Right.
And in this case, we had those guys who were just literally off the chain, with some of the stuff that they were asking. And it was kind of a disruptive factor in the class. But, basically you sort of just put your head down and, get what you can get regardless of the disruptions. And that's what I think a lot of people did.
So CCL, Illinois calls them CCL, Concealed Carry License. So they I looked up my facts here, and they became available January 5th, 2014. So we're going on 2 years here this January. So when you took this class, was it like right during that time period when it first became available? Yes.
And I think that's one of the reasons why there were so many people in the lining up for taking classes. It was so new, and there was so much demand. The company that did the training for the classes for my CCL, they're actually they provide firearms training, tactical training for defensive firearms. They had so much demand for CCL training until for many, many months, initially, they just weren't doing any of the firearms training. They had their hands full providing CCL training.
Oh, so for quite a while they had to stop all their specialty firearms training and just focus on the handgun permits.
Yes. So that's one of the first things I was interested in initially was taking some of the defensive handgun training that they offered. But they had their hands full with CCL training, and I think they're back to the defensive training now. But at that time, they were just swamped, and that went on for several months, because I recall giving them several phone calls asking when they are planning on resuming the defensive handgun training, and I think it took them roughly a year before they saw some daylight and were able to sort of get back into their specialty of providing the firearms defensive training. And unfortunately, I haven't taken advantage of that yet, but I'm planning to.
Yeah, that's quite a contrast to my classroom experience. So I went with a local guy here. He used to run one of the gun stores here, and now he only does concealed carry training. So I kind of knew him from before, so I signed up for one of his classes, and it wasn't right when the law went into effect. It was that fall, I believe it was like August or so, because at that time I was still working at the post office 6 days a week, and there just wasn't a point in my eyes. I'm like, I can't even park here and leave it in the truck or anything. So
right.
So I don't know, wasn't a giant priority. Maybe it should have been, but that, just being honest, that's how it was for me. And so I took it later on, and it wasn't crazy. At least in my area, it had kind of died down, where everyone wasn't trying to get in a class and they were all full. So I have smaller class, about 14 or 15 people.
Lucky you.
Yeah. And so there it was nice, because there was time for people to ask those honest questions and to really get the information they need, because a lot of the people in my class were very, very new to firearms in general. I mean, maybe they had owned guns, maybe they had been around guns, but they weren't like going out once or twice a month and to the range and shooting and really being part of the gun culture. They were just gun owners. I don't know if that makes sense, but they were much more Not a crazy podcaster gun guy like me, I guess. To put it that way, but because I don't know if you want to touch on the classroom curriculum here, but what was your reaction to that? I'll let you go first, and then
Sure. Well, you know that for Illinois, there's 2 classes that you have to take. There's one of several for stage 1.
So let's first say there's so for Illinois there's 16 hours of required classroom, and very little of that is actually firing on the range. It's mostly entirely in the classroom. And so for the first 8 hours, the NRA basic pistol is what a lot of instructors will teach. That's what mine did. How about yours, Greg?
Yes, mine was the first 8 hours was the basic firearm safety. On that same subject, earlier I was talking about how large the classroom was for the second phase. For my basic NRA firearm safety, there was only maybe about 10 or 15 people in that class. Okay. Yeah, the contrast was amazing. That maybe, at least for me, the NRA basic firearms was fine. It provided some information. But for me, the contrast was the number of people in that class relative to the second phase 2. Same company provided both classes, but the number of people was just amazing. Apparently, I guess a lot of people had already fit that first criteria. For example, if you're a former military, there's a document that you provide to sort of opt out of that, one of that first 8 hours, and you can go directly to stage 2. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, correct. So if you're former, there's a lot of training safety courses that also qualify. But yeah, if you've been or if you're active duty or honorably discharged from the military, you can submit a form. And I had it in front of me, and now I lost it. Mm-hmm. But that would cover you for 8 hours. Prior law enforcement covers you for 8 hours. And then some of the other NRA courses also cover you for those first 8 hours, like personal protection in the home, personal protection outside the home, basic pistol. And then I guess there's something called a Chicago Firearms Safety Course, which covers you for 4 hours.
Really? Oh, yeah, you're right. Yes, I do recall that now.
And then some of the concealed carry training from other states cover you for 4 hours. Utah, Florida, Nevada, Missouri, Kentucky, and Michigan cover you for 4 hours. And then the Illinois Hunter Safety Course covers you for 4 hours as well.
Right.
So there's quite a few people that were probably eligible for one of those or multiple acceptable training credits there. Now, I found it interesting that the course I took, there were several people in it that were one was prior law enforcement, and others were prior retired military, and they still opted to take all 16 hours just for whatever reason, for a refresher, just to they were like they didn't want to miss out. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, I had my Utah permit, at least a year or two prior to taking the Illinois classes, and I chose not to use the Utah for the 4 hours. I wanted to get as much as I could out of it, so I did the full 8 hour NRA basic safety class. I could have opted out and tried something else, but I chose not to.
So the second half of your training, then the part with the range time, that was the crazy full 100 people size course. So how did the range time go with that?
Well, you had as many people show up there as were in the prior training. So you still had 100 people to show up, at a very small range. So there were, the range was closed that morning, only open to accommodate the class.
So was this an indoor or outdoor range?
This was an indoor range. Indoor range with about 7 or 8 stalls.
So were people lined up down the street like Black Friday?
Lined up, yes, they were lined up around the corner. The Legion Hall, where everyone showed up to, finalize everything prior to taking the range time. Everybody, of course, showed up there. You wanted to get your sign up ASAP so you can make the mad dash about a mile or two down the road to get to the range. And it was like a Mad Max derby. Everybody's hauling to get to the range so they can get their names on the list to take the range portion of the training. So we all show up. People are mulling around, getting their name on the list, and then waiting in line to get their turn. So in the stall area, there were about 3 people per stall. People were sort of in a line, so to speak. So the range instructor was, sort of telling everyone what to do, making these announcements, making sure everyone was paying attention, so you can get time to punch holes in your ginormous target that you have to. Is that a B3? Is that what that's called?
Off the top of my head, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's large. It's a very, very large target, and there's 3 distances that you have to qualify. You have to make sure that you're hitting within the silhouette at 3 different distances, and it wasn't very difficult at all. I thought it was going to be harder than it was because of nerves, being anticipation, but you could pass it almost with your eyes closed. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you could. But that was basically the experience. Small range, lots of people. They had sort of a staging area at the range to 3 people per stall. Those people would do their firing exercise. The instructor would check the targets. Okay, you're good to go. Those 8 people would sort of collect their targets, haul out. That next group standing behind them, they move forward. So they did that until they got everyone out. Go ahead.
That's nuts. Yeah, that's. Compared to my class of about 15, we had to take turns just 3 times to have everyone take a turn to shoot. So yeah, this was very interesting, and I was also paying close attention to some of the firearms that people were using. There were some firearms there that were more collector's items than something that you might think about carrying. There was one guy that had a broom handle Mauser, believe it or not. And I'm thinking, wow, really? You're not gonna really carry that? I'm thinking to myself, I wanted to ask him if he was planning on carrying it, but I don't think so. I think this was just an opportunity for him to fire that fantastic looking firearm, by the way. I don't think, of course not. Of course he wasn't going to carry that. It's just a collector's item, right? But there were some very interesting firearms there. And yeah, and I saw the same thing. Some interesting choices for firearms. Some of them are obviously not going to be carrying them, and a lot of the people I took the class with said, well, I don't know, I may never carry. I just thought I should get the permit just in case.
Sure.
And there were some ladies there that just wanted to have it. I don't know. I guess just to have it. I mean, they primarily had the mindset of a gun for home defense, but yet for whatever reason they thought they should get a permit as well. And maybe it was just the Illinois Concealed Carry course, they saw it as an opportunity for training that they had always wanted to take and just never did.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't blame anyone for taking it, even if they didn't plan on carrying. I think just having it, and so when you do decide to carry it, you're doing it legally. 'cause I think that's the whole most important part is you're, following the law so that you sort of, give a good name to people who, who do it, carry responsibly.
Right. Right. And, I've heard from friends in other states that, if you were caught carrying a firearm concealed, that it was like a minor misdemeanor or something like that. Whereas Illinois,
Really?
you'll never see that person again.
Right. It'd be whisked away. Right.
So in Illinois, it's much more, I don't know, rewarding to follow the law, I guess.
I kind of want to make a comment, but it's getting into politics. So.
Yeah. So yeah, we had pretty stark differences in training. Now I'm much more in a rural area here. I'm about a little over an hour away from Chicago, and out in the cornfields here of northern Illinois. And Greg, I guess you're a little closer to the city, at least
yes.
Bigger population center.
Mm-hmm. I am.
So I guess what was it like? With your family, I guess did that get brought up at Thanksgiving and stuff? Like, is your family the type of family that has the same mindset as yours? Or
no, no. In a word, no. My wife, it's taken her some time to sort of come around. Luckily, I had 2 years under my belt with my Utah permit, so I had that opportunity to kind of acclimate her to the whole idea. My mom doesn't know that I carry, and neither does my sister. But I have other relatives that are in law enforcement, and we talk about these things, and they know, and especially at the holidays, like Thanksgiving, Christmas gatherings, and we always end up getting into talk about firearms because there's a group of people in that within the family who sort of we all kind of share the same mindset. But I have other members of my family who are, just dead set against it. And interestingly enough, those are some of the best conversations because those are opportunities to sort of dispel some of the myth about, people who carry firearms, that they're looking for trouble and all that sort of thing. The basic, bad press that are associated with firearms. It's the inanimate object, right? It's the center of all evil
right.
in the world, as opposed to the individual who uses that inanimate object illegally to commit crime. So it's a great opportunity to make that contrast, and I do every opportunity that I get. And interestingly enough, those conversations, we all come away with a better understanding. I understand their point of view, and they understand that, oh, okay, I never gave that any consideration. Why do you carry a gun? Why do you like shooting? Then you get an opportunity to talk about, well, it's about precision. It's about control. It's about, understanding the process. It's more than just pointing this thing down range and just pulling the trigger, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things associated with it. Take into account, decathlons, or I think that's what that's called, where they ski and shoot. There's a whole Zen issue around that because you have to sort of quiet your mind and body in order to, control this firearm after having skied, cross country, right?
I'm not sure I could even snowmobile cross country and shoot.
Exactly. And so those are sort of this mix of ideas and conversations around firearms and what it means to carry, what it means to shoot targets. It's a fun thing. It's a sport. It's a recreation. It's not just looking for trouble and using a firearm to resolve conflict. It's just a lot more to it than that. So these conversations, getting back to your question about family dynamics associated with the firearm lifestyle, the opportunity for people of different mindsets to come together and kind of understand each other's point of view. I get to do that with family. It's a place to start, you know. So that's sort of how the family dynamic has worked out.
Now, I have to ask, you said your mom doesn't know.
No, she might now. But
So why is that? Are you afraid to tell her?
No, I just think that, you know, she's a mom. So she's, you know, just the whole idea of, my son is carrying, you know, I just don't want her to worry about that. You know, just don't.
Okay. So, yeah, you know, I don't, I don't, you know, I know there's members of my family that aren't crazy about firearms, but you know, luckily I don't have anyone like vehemently anti-gun or anything. So that's you know, something I really don't have to deal with. And you know, sometimes you know, I'll get a few questions, but you know, nothing major. So
yeah. I mean, funny thing when you talk about, you know, family and the dynamics associated with that, and not to get into the politics of it, but my sister, when we lived in Wisconsin, she went to the range with me. She's working in education now, so she is sort of turned the script, so to speak, and she's a lot more anti firearm than I remember her being, and I think it's just a result of the profession that she's in, and probably some of the negativity, you know, that's been associated with education, you know, children and firearms, and that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's a whole nother show we could do on.
Yes, it is.
Kids and firearms education, and
right.
So, you know, let's talk a little bit about concealed carrying in the wild. You know, we both got our permits, and then I guess you said you'd been experimenting with it with your Utah license and other states. So, tell me a little bit about your, I don't know, first few outings, being armed. Like, what was that like for you?
It was, oh my God. I remember to this day just how unsettling it was. I am, you know, comfortable with firearms, but the first time I wore that firearm outside of the doors of my home was memorable. It was palpable that I felt this bulge on the side of my waist, and you know, the idea, and I read that, you know, people who do this initially, you know, feel that everyone knows it's there. You know, this thing is printing like crazy. You know, am I going to drop it? So, you know, as a new concealed carrier, and you know, I read about this a lot. What do? You're checking, you're feeling, you're making sure that thing is still in place. And as a result, I believe it makes you stand out like a sore thumb. You know, why are you grabbing why are you holding your side? It was just such a, I almost felt like I had this big sandwich sign, you know, saying gun carrier on my chest. And it just took a lot of getting used to. What I ended up doing was, after I did it the first time, and after I realized how uncomfortable that I was carrying it, at least fearful somewhat, I sort of took the approach. Well, okay, I need to get used to everything associated with, you know, carrying a firearm on the outside of my home. The things you do, you know, how you move, how you dress, you know, some of the more basic human needs. How do you manage that when you're out and about? How do you go to the men's room? How do you deal with that without dropping the firearm on the floor of the men's room? So what I ended up doing was wearing the firearm at home from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed. So that gave me an opportunity to all the things that I typically do throughout the day, including the restroom stops, the chores around the house, the, taking out the trash, just, sitting in a chair, how do you manage that? Because it's all different once you have a firearm, because depending on the chair you're sitting in and the position you're sitting in, this thing is there, right? So I did that day in and day out for about 3 weeks. And for that 3-week period, I didn't carry on the outside, but I only carried at home just so I could become totally at one with this new appendage, basically, that I've grown, right? And it gave me an opportunity to sort of play with positions. You do your 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, appendix. So I started playing with all those positions, and I actually, came up with, here's a position that seems to work for me in terms of comfort levels. Sitting for long periods of time, like when you're in your car, for example. If you're in a restaurant, and that's the ones where you can't carry. Okay, I'm making that caveat. But how do you do all these things when you're carrying this firearm? I was carrying a Glock 26, and then I started experimenting with something a little larger, so I carried a Glock 23. And just experiment to make a determination as to which one worked better for me. And I sort of settled on the Glock 26. But then I ended up settling on appendix, where initially I started at 4 o'clock position on the waistband. But then that led to changes in the holster. And we'll be talking about that. We can talk about that as well. But that was my initial experience. The fear factor of carrying it initially, doing as much reading as I can about other people who have found themselves in situations where they had to use firearms. Training, of course, it's something that I'm planning on doing, but I haven't done it yet. So that will come. But it's just kind of an overall footprint synopsis as to what I went through when I initially carried and the process around that.
Yeah, figuring out the belt position that you're most comfortable with can take some time.
And I was doing it without a gun belt. I was just using the standard dress belt, and that was a learning experience. I quickly came to understand that the standard dress belt doesn't necessarily lend itself to concealed carry. So I eventually bought a belt dedicated. I bought a Galco, and that worked out very, very well. Once I did that, it really did change, the whole feel and comfort level of carrying. Made it much better.
See, I had been wearing a concealed carry belt for years and years prior, so I had the belt. I had the belt down.
Right. Okay, you had that part nailed. All right.
But yeah, it is funny when you first start carrying in public, where you walk out or walk into a store and you kind of feel naked. In a way, you feel like everyone's looking at you.
Oh yeah.
And you feel like you got like this huge bulge on your side where the gun is. You feel like people are going to start asking you.
Yeah, why are you carrying that? Right.
Yeah.
My first foray was in a grocery store. I was doing my grocery shopping on the first day that I decided to carry, and everybody that looks at you, you think people just in passing, you just sometimes make eye contact with people, and that's just something that happens during the day. And I swear to God, everybody that looked at me, I thought, oh, he knows I'm wearing a gun. It was just this really weird.
Right. You're like, do people normally stare this much at me?
Right. So then I'm thinking, okay, is he carrying a gun? I'm looking at, you're sort of like, and after you, at least me, after I'd been wearing it for a while, and occasionally, you stop in a gun store like a Cabela's or something. And I remember having a conversation with a guy. We're talking about holsters. He just lifts up his shirt. Oh, this is what I'm carrying. I'm like, are you kidding? Really? Really? I'm like, okay. Yeah, I would never do that, but I thought that was weird that this guy decided that I'm going to show you what I'm carrying.
Yeah, I would not recommend ever doing that.
No, but now that I think about it, he was carrying one of those nylon holsters, those things,
right.
The $5 ones,
like the Uncle Mike's. Yeah.
I'm not going to get into brand centric. I won't do that. But it was one of those nylon ones that, first of all, those things bulge out. They stick out like crazy, because they're basically outside of waistband holsters. And so he was carrying that. And I thought that was interesting that he's carrying, but then he's carrying with that holster of all things. But hey, I don't want to get into
that's something my dad would do though. I mean, he'd buy a new gun and buy an Uncle Mike's for it or something. He'd be like, I'm not paying $50 for a holster.
I went that route myself. I mean, that's why it took me so long to finally buy a belt dedicated to carry, because I thought I could do it with a regular dress belt. And I know a lot of people that sort of start out with that point of view. Oh, I got a belt that's pretty stiff. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll talk about this a few months from now, and we'll see if you still feel that way.
Yeah. So, I don't know, want to touch on your perceptions of the community you live in, whether or not, now that Illinois has CCW, do you think the perception in your community has changed at all?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe that. Well, one thing is for sure. The fear mongering that went along with the enactment of the concealed carry law in Illinois, didn't come to fruition. There's no running gun battles on the street amongst concealed carriers, legal concealed carry people. That's not to say that, criminals are still doing what they do, but then they're not following the process. They're not getting the training. They're not, doing it lawfully. But amongst concealed carriers, there's no running gun battles in the streets. And, that's, the fear mongering that typically happens with kind of controversial subjects like firearms. So I think that people who, start out with the notion that they're against firearms, they probably still feel that way, even though we have concealed carry. I just hope that some people might think twice before they, decide to mug someone. I know we're getting into politics, right? But I don't know if the perception by individuals who just don't believe in firearms, I don't think that changes. Well, just because we have a law.
I wonder if it's brought it to the attention of more people. Maybe especially people that are neutral on the, people that are neutral on the issue. They don't give it a thought one way or the other, and then all of a sudden, everyone on the news is talking about concealed carry and how Illinois is the last state to get it, and they're like, mm-hmm. Really? You can carry in all other 49 states?
Right. Yeah, it was very disconcerting. Like once I moved from Wisconsin, then they get concealed carry. I'm like, oh, really? Are you kidding? Really?
So, in your area, did you see a bunch of do not carry signs pop up on windows? The state of Illinois has like a form factor for the you can't carry here symbol that popped up on lots of places and out here. And I live in more of a cornfield farming community kind of. I mean, it's not entirely that we have Northern Illinois University here, so it's quite diverse in the types of people that live here, at least during 9 months of the year. So
right.
So, but I saw a lot of those signs pop up. How about in your area? Did you see that as well?
In the city, yes, the signs are everywhere. What was for me most disconcerting is that the signs were really small initially. I think they made some changes and that signs are a little bigger now. But initially, there were these tiny things that were really, really easy to miss. And there were more than a few times when I walked into a place not at all recognizing or paying attention that there was a sign. But on my way out, I might notice that, oh, Jesus, they had a sign in the window. I didn't see it. It was little small little things. That was in the city. Where I live just outside of Chicago. And surprisingly enough, and I'm glad to see that I really don't see a lot of signs just outside of the city. But in the city of Chicago, yes, they're everywhere.
And I guess we should mention, Illinois has such a convoluted where you can't carry list of places.
Right.
It's kind of walking through, especially in your area. I got to think when you go into the city, it's like playing the floor is lava type of deal, and where you can't carry here, you can here, you can't here.
Right.
There's a lot of public places, public transit you can't carry on. And,
yes.
I mean that's got to be a huge inconvenience for people that work in the city and live in the suburbs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine you walk outside of your door, you can carry that weapon, but as soon as you decide to take public transportation to get to another location within the city, you can't. And that's the way it is now. And when the law was initiated at first, it was anticipated that some of these things may change. And, we're on the second year and it hasn't. But my guess is that some of these restricted areas may change. Now, some of that may happen as a result of lawsuits. You never know. But usually a law in its initial stages, changes after it matures. So I'm thinking that that'll probably happen here in Illinois as well.
Yeah, I sure hope so, that we'll start peeling off parts of this onion for all these restrictions where pretty much any public place you're publicly owned, I guess owned by a municipality or like parks and trails,
yes.
Even bike trails you can't.
Yes. Of all places,
it's
right?
Crazy. I mean, I can't go jogging, across the street from my house armed.
Well, you remember a couple of years ago. Well, maybe even as last summer, I think there was a rash of sexual assaults on jogging trails and bike trails, and it's more than ironic that that's one of the areas where you can't carry. I mean, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to ban something like that. I get it, public park or something, yeah, okay. But a bike trail, those are typically, kind of secluded and kind of rife for someone who wants to, do something illicit. That should be a place where people should be able to, have some safety margin, be able to carry for their own safety. So, my guess is people probably do anyway, as long as you're not caught.
Well, you're right. I mean, a lot of these places, people may, it's just a quick part of your class, and you don't think about it after that. You're just kind of, if you start carrying as a lifestyle, you may not even remember that. I mean, that's why I call them gotcha laws. I mean,
sure.
They get you just for carrying on your daily life.
And that's how I feel about it as well. In fact, it's probably a good idea to regularly, maybe, twice a year, go to the website and check to see if there's any changes to these locations, because I'm not sure how widely advertised it would be. If they added an area that was once restricted or vice versa.
Well, that's just the thing with public areas like trails and parks, and like there's no signs or anything. It's just an open park. I mean, there's no
right.
Big "do not carry" sign at the entrances or anything. And so
that's true. That's true. And I think for example, if you're walking through a park, that's okay. So I'm not sure, how much, technically, lawfully, to the letter of the law, how much time in one of these restricted areas would be considered illegal. But if you're walking through, and I think they actually talked about this initially, if you're walking through one of these restricted areas like a park or a bike trail, you're on your way to some other place, then it's okay. But there's no real conversation about what that means in terms of duration. If you're there 5 minutes, is it okay? But 10 minutes is illegal? I don't know.
So you had mentioned a little bit earlier, you had surmised that, there's not, now that we have concealed carry in Illinois, there's not blood running in the streets. There is always in Chicago, but it's not the result of concealed carriers that are causing the violence. So good guys with guns are already making a difference here in Illinois. There's several stories out of the Chicagoland area where good guys with guns have stopped robberies and gunmen. There was a story a while back of an Uber driver that stopped a gunman in Logan Square. Mm-hmm. And there is a guy just month ago or so that he stopped an armed robbery, and there's actually a story just this week that the Chicago police actually gave him his gun back, which shocked me. I'm like, man,
yeah, that is shocking.
I thought if you ever use your gun in self-defense and you're justified in Chicago, you're never seeing that again.
Exactly.
But apparently the Chicago PD actually gave the guy his gun back. So
wow, yeah, I didn't think that was possible.
So
okay. Good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I have seen some statistics that criminals in Chicagoland may actually be thinking twice. Violence and armed robbery is down since the law has gone into effect. So
that's good. That's the intent, right? That's kind of what we all hope for.
Yeah, especially in a city like Chicago, the police obviously don't have a handle on the crime, and so you need some way to, protect yourself.
Well, my friends and family and law enforcement always reminds me that often, police are only there in the aftermath.
Yep.
You're kind of, we're not saying this is a road warrior kind of situation, but you have to sort of take a certain amount of precautions on your own, so that you're not one of these situations where, no, you're just a statistic after the fact.
Well, I think we'll wrap up the concealed carry part of the main topic. Greg, did you have any final thoughts?
I would just say that, I'm very, very happy that we finally have a concealed carry law, and I'm very happy that concealed carriers have been responsible in their exercising that right to keep and bear arms, and that keep it up.
Absolutely.
Rah, rah.
Let's talk a little bit about your holster making company. So, when did you start playing around with Kydex?
When I got my Utah permit and started buying holsters, you always hear people who plan or have been carrying that they have a drawer full of holsters. And I have a drawer full of holsters, and that happened as a result of trying holsters, and for one reason or another, they just didn't quite work out. fit and finish, comfort. Those are usually the two big ones. And shortly thereafter, I started thinking about, well, okay, this holster is okay. This one is kind of okay. Here's the things I like about it. Here's the things I don't. And looking at YouTube and discovering that, hey, people are using this material called Kydex to make holsters. I started researching it, looking into it, and started experimenting with some things. Made a couple of holsters for myself. Kind of gave them to people. Here, try this out. Tell me what you think. And one thing led to another, so I ended up starting a small holster making business, and that was the start of it. Is my discontent with some of the things that I was spending lots of money for and not being often happy with.
Well, very cool. So your company's called Index Point Holsters, and
yes.
You specialize in inside the waistband and mostly for Glock, right?
Primarily for Glocks. That's where I started making holsters for Glocks. For the Glock that I was carrying, the Glock 26, 27, quote, baby Glock. So that was the start, and moved shortly thereafter into the mid-size Glocks, Glock 23, Glock 19. Then went to the Glock 43, 42, like smaller, very, very compact Glocks, and sort of started merging into other holsters like the XDSs and the Shields and SIG P290s, sort of very, very small holsters, but strictly Kydex at this point in time.
Oh, very cool. So I guess what sets your holsters apart?
Well, one of the things that I do is I only use the .08 Kydex. That's is not the thinnest Kydex. It's got a little bit more heft, a little bit more beefiness to it, but as a result, that beefiness gives the holster a lot more resilience and staying power. In addition, the holster wears very well. Interesting enough, and a lot of people are always surprised that when they first wear a Kydex holster, they're thinking, oh, it's a solid molded piece of plastic. Ooh, this is going to be very uncomfortable. People are always very surprised as to how comfortable the holster actually is. And so one of the reasons for that is that, we make sure in the designs that there are no sharp edges. The edges of the holster themselves are rounded and polished so that if they do come in contact with clothing or skin, it just sort of like slides right past it. There's no 90-degree edges that can sort of, catch you in the groin if you happen to be wearing the holster in appendix style. So fit and finish is very important, using very, very good belt clips, very, very nice rust-resistant hardware for the holsters. The inside of the holsters are extremely smooth, so that drawing the weapon and reholstering is, almost effortless. A retention in every holster, regardless of the size, so that you can make that adjustment to give just the amount of resistance that you prefer personally for your holster. So those are some of the things that I think make Index Point holsters stand out. Each holster is handmade and hand finished, so you're getting a product that's been handled tender loving care by myself in every step of the process.
So I've been wearing one for, I don't know, months now. I can't remember when you first sent this original one to me. And I really enjoy it. I mean, it's my best holster I've had so far. And I did have that misconception that a hard, blocky looking piece of Kydex holster might be really uncomfortable. I had that misperception, because I had worn several hybrid holsters prior to that, and they're all about comfort and breathability and everything, and I just really like this one a lot better because it's actually more comfortable and it's easier to put on and off, and it's still just as easy to draw from. and it's really enjoyable. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate you sending me one to try out. And
absolutely, I've sort of gone through that same same process with the hybrid holsters. That large patch of leather or whatever that substrate material is. Spreading that weight out across your belt. It in theory it seems to work, but if you've carried a holster like that for a while and then you transition immediately to a small footprint Kydex holster, you'd be really surprised as to how much you don't notice that Kydex holster where you might actually notice that large footprint of the hybrid holster. Also, that large patch is kind of an area where your skin may not breathe as well because you've got this patch kind of covering a pretty large portion of your side. And of course, ease of taking it on and taking it off is a major factor, especially if you're transitioning into and out of a car, for example, and you want to take that holster off when you're driving. That large hybrid holster is something that that whole process of taking it on and off is not as quick.
Well, yeah, and I highly recommend a holster this style for anyone that needs to take it on and off a few times during the day. Because you're right, it's just too. I had tried that before with the hybrids, and it's just too much of a pain, and I feel like it's a little bit unsafe. Maybe not unsafe, but it made me feel a little more uncomfortable removing and reattaching the big hybrid.
Right. Well, you can't do it discreetly either.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, nothing I do is discreet, so.
Okay.
So yeah, and people can check out your website, indexpointholsters.com. And I guess you mainly sell them through eBay, right?
Primarily eBay. There's also a website that's PayPal. Does all the back end transactions. But right. Yes, eBay primarily. But the website has the same offerings, and there's options for each holster. You can choose to have a sweat guard or not. You can choose different color grommets. Along with the various firearms that we're currently doing, and we're expanding the types of firearms that we're going to be using. Probably going to be opening up some more Glock holsters. There's a lot of Glock users out there, and people are carrying different size Glocks for different reasons. So we're probably going to be expanding to the larger, maybe some of the larger Glocks.
Cool. Yeah, crazy Glock people.
Right.
So yeah, you really good price points. They start out at what, $35?
They start at $35. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, check them out. Index Point. Let me try that again. indexpointholsters.com, and really great photos on there, and you can check them out and select all those options for you. Yep. Well, Greg, I really appreciate you. Really appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
We now interrupt your regular scheduled programming with a brief message from your president, George Washington.
Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray but almost blind in the service of my country. By an anonymous summons, an attempt has been made to convene you together to promote Patriot Patch Company's patriotic 4-pack of morale patches. These finely crafted, Velcro-backed, PVC-injected patches feature 4 vintage designs: the Bennington flag, the Gadsden flag, the Gonzales flag, and the Confederate battle flag. I have thought it incumbent on me to observe to you these admirable patches available at patriotpatch.co. Had this day been wanting, the world had never seen the last stage of perfection to which human nature is capable of attaining. Pre-order yours with haste at patriotpatch.co.
Gun Guy Radio says thank you and proudly displays artwork and graphics designed by Ryan Cross of Hunter of Design. hunterofdesign.com.
That about wraps us up. Remember to subscribe in iTunes so you never miss a show. Leave us that iTunes review. And also, please consider joining the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation. And don't forget to check out all the other awesome shows on the Firearms Radio Network.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv. Hey, since you're already listening to a show on the Firearms Radio Network, then you should check out the God and Guns podcast. Troy and Doug talk about guns from a Christian perspective and, of course, God. GodandGunsPodcast.com/iTunes. Subscribe now.